When my ex-wife drove past my tent and shouted, "You're a loser, Jake. You'll die broke, just like your father," I said nothing. Because honestly, she wasn't wrong. At least, not back then. My name is Jake Lawson, and 6 months ago, I was living in a tent on the outskirts of Denver. No job, no savings, no home. The only thing I owned was a second-hand guitar and a box of old letters from my dad. To understand how I got there, you'd have to know what happened before everything fell apart. 5 years ago, I had a family, a wife named Samantha, and a son, Eli. We had a small house, a mortgage, and dreams that felt simple enough. But when my dad passed away, something inside me cracked. He was a truck driver, a quiet man, and when I went through his things, all I found were overdue bills and a faded photo of him standing beside an old cargo plane. The night of the funeral, Samantha told me I needed to move on and start being realistic. I tried. I worked 2 jobs, fixed cars during the day, and stocked shelves at night. But the more I worked, the more I felt like my father had taken some piece of himself to the grave that I was supposed to find. When I got laid off last winter, Samantha finally snapped. "You're hopeless," she said, shoving a suitcase into my hands. My father was right. "Will never be more than a failure." She filed for divorce the next day, took Eli Sari, and remarried within 3 months to her boss, a guy who owned a real estate firm. I tried to fight for custody, but the lawyer I could barely afford said I didn't stand a chance. That's how I ended up in that tent, working odd jobs and trying not to think about the life I'd lost. I'd visit Eli sometimes when Samantha let me, and he'd ask, "Dad, why don't you have a house like Mum?" I never had an answer that didn't sound pathetic. Then, one morning, as I was boiling instant coffee over a camp stove, a black SUV pulled up to the field. 2 men in suits stepped out, flashing badges. "Mr. Lawson?" One of them asked. "We're with Interpol." I froze. "Interpol? You've got the wrong guy. I've never even left Colorado." The taller one smiled faintly. "Maybe not. But your father did." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name typed across it. "We think it's time you learned what he left behind." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments about which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. I opened the envelope, expecting paperwork or some official mistake, but inside was a bank certificate, and next to my father's name were the words, "Account balance, $1,426,000. I must have read that number a dozen times. $1,426,000. I thought it had to be a mistake. My dad couldn't even keep his truck insurance paid on time. How could he have more than $1 million sitting in some bank? The Interpol agent, a tall man named Agent Reeves, sat down across from me on an old camping chair. "Mr. Lawson, your father, Thomas Lawson, was linked to an investigation that's been ongoing for over 20 years. Linked?" I repeated, half laughing. "My dad drove trucks and ate chili from cans. You must have the wrong guy." Reeves shook his head. "He wasn't just a truck driver. According to our records, he worked as a courier for an international cargo company based out of Switzerland. It was a front for something much bigger: smuggling high-value assets through private air routes." I stared at him, stunned. "You're telling me my dad was a criminal?" Reeves hesitated. "Not exactly. We believe he stumbled onto something and took it." He handed me another paper from the envelope. It was an old flight manifest, dated 1998. My father's name was listed under crew. Next to the cargo entry, "Unregistered diplomatic container." What was inside? I asked. "That's what we never found out," Reeves said. "But 2 weeks after that flight, the company dissolved overnight. No records. No investors. Everyone vanished, except your father." I tried to process it all. My dad, the man who fixed old radios and spent Sunday mornings fishing with me, had been part of some international operation and never said a word. Reeves continued. "That bank certificate was issued by a private institution in Geneva. The account was frozen after his death until we could locate a next of kin. That's you. So, what happens now?" I asked cautiously. He leaned forward. You'll need to fly to Switzerland to claim the funds. But be warned, money like this has history attached to it. Dangerous history. I sat there in silence, feeling the Colorado wind whip against the tent fabric behind me. For the first time since losing everything, I didn't feel small. I felt curious. That night, I drove into town and used the last of my savings to buy a plane ticket. Before I left, I stopped by Samantha's house. She came to the door in her robe, smirking. "What do you want now, Jake?" "Gas money." I held up the Interpol envelope and said, "Just wanted to let you know, I'm going on a little trip, Europe." She laughed in disbelief. "Right. Maybe they're hiring hobos at the Eiffel Tower." But 3 days later, I was stepping off a flight in Geneva, holding my father's name like a ticket into another life. I didn't know it yet, but the truth waiting for me in that bank would prove my dad hadn't just been hiding money, he'd been hiding a crime that could have gotten him killed. When I arrived in Geneva, I felt completely out of place, sleep-deprived, broke, and dressed in the same worn jacket I'd owned for years. Everyone around me looked sharp, polished, like they belonged. I didn't. The address on the Interpol documents led me to a narrow street, lined with marble buildings. At the corner stood Bank Helvetia Privy, a place so spotless it looked unreal. Inside, everything gleamed: marble floors, gold lettering, and silence so thick you could hear your heartbeat. A receptionist greeted me in a crisp French accent. "Monsieur Lawson, we've been expecting you." I froze. "Expecting me?" She nodded politely and led me to a private office. An older man in a tailored suit stood when I entered. "Mr. Lawson," he said, shaking my hand, "I'm Mr. Duval, the account manager for your late father. Please, sit." On his desk sat a small black safe deposit box, no bigger than a shoebox. He unlocked it with a key identical to the one taped to my mother's letter. Inside was not what I expected. No stacks of cash. No gold bars. Just a leather notebook, a USB drive, and an old photo of my dad standing beside two men in front of a cargo plane. The same one from the manifest. The other two faces were blurred out by time and sunlight. Duval cleared his throat. "Before we continue, I must inform you that Interpol has already accessed part of this account's history." However, he paused, lowering his voice. "Your father left instructions. This account is tied to a second one, hidden. He wanted you to find it." "How?" I asked. Duval smiled faintly. "That notebook will tell you." I opened it. My father's handwriting filled the first page. "Jake, if you're reading this, they've found me, or they will soon. Don't trust anyone connected to the bank. The truth is in Zurich. Locker 117. But once you open it, you can't turn back." I looked up at Duval, who was still watching me carefully. "Who's they?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "The men in that photograph. Your father worked for them until he realized what they were moving: not money, not gold. People." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Human trafficking." He nodded slowly. "Your father exposed them. That's why he vanished from the records." Before I could ask anything else, the door burst open. Two men in dark coats entered, speaking rapidly in French. One of them flashed a badge, but not Interpol's. Duval went pale. "Mr. Lawson, go, now." They started shouting. Duval shoved the notebook and USB into my hands, whispering, "Trust no one." I ran out of the office and into the freezing Geneva air, heart pounding, sirens echoing somewhere in the distance. I didn't know it yet, but I'd just inherited more than a fortune. I'd inherited my father's enemies. I didn't stop running until I reached the train station. My lungs burned, my heart pounded, and every instinct screamed that I was being followed. I bought the first ticket I could find: Zurich, 2 hours away, slipped onto the train just as it pulled out. I sat near the back, gripping my father's notebook like it was a lifeline. The USB drive was hidden in my sock. The notebook, when I opened it again, was more like a journal: scattered notes, half sentences, and coordinates written in the margins. Most of it didn't make sense until I saw a page near the back. Locker sent, Idisasechi, Zurich Central. Password, Echo 47. If I don't make it, tell Jake the truth. The cargo wasn't what they said. They called it Project Eden. Don't trust the badge. The badge. Interpol. My stomach sank. Had those men at my tent really been who they claimed? When the train reached Zurich, I blended into the crowd and found the locker area in the basement level. It smelled like rust and oil. Rows of metal doors lined the wall, each one numbered in neat black paint. I found 117, entered the code, and turned the key. The door creaked open. Inside was a small metal case, heavier than it looked. I set it on the floor and flipped the latch. Inside were stacks of old documents, faded passports, and a bundle of sealed photos. At the bottom lay a small silver drive, marked with a red X. I plugged it into my phone using an adapter and waited. A single video file appeared, Eden footage _1998.mov. When I pressed play, my father's face filled the screen. His eyes looked older than I remembered, but his voice was steady. Jake, if you're watching this, they found me. You need to understand the men I worked for weren't businessmen. They were diplomats, smugglers, and killers hiding under government contracts. Interpol knew, but couldn't touch them. So, I took proof. I hid it here. He looked over his shoulder, whispering. The cargo wasn't gold, it was human. Children, dozens of them. I got one out. I couldn't save the rest. My hands shook. You need to find the one I saved. His name is Eli Crane. He'll know the rest. Eli Crane. The name hit me like a punch. Crane was Samantha's new husband, my ex-wife's boss. The same man who took her and my son away. Before I could process it, the lights in the locker area flickered. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned and saw two men in coats, one of them, Agent Reeves. Only now, he wasn't holding an Interpol badge. He was holding a gun. Jake, he said calmly, stepping closer, you shouldn't have opened that box. Reeves' gun was steady, his expression too calm. Put the drive down, Jake, he said softly. You don't understand what you're holding. I stepped back, the cold metal of the locker pressing against my spine. You lied to me. You're not Interpol. He smiled faintly. Not anymore. Let's just say I work for the people your father betrayed. That money, that accountant, wasn't his to take. Behind him, his partner blocked the exit. My mind raced. I had no weapon, no plan. Just my father's notebook, and his warning, don't trust the badge. I glanced at the USB drive in my hand. You want this? I said. Then come take it. I hurled it at the floor. It shattered into two pieces, one skidding under the row of lockers. Reeves swore and turned his head. That half-second was all I needed. I slammed the locker door into him, knocking the gun from his grip. It clattered to the floor, and I kicked it away. Bolting through the emergency exit, as alarms screamed. I didn't stop running until I reached the street. Sirens wailed somewhere behind me. My hands were shaking, but I still had my phone and the video from my father's message saved on it. That was the real proof. I found a tiny cafe near the station, ducked inside, and connected to their Wi-Fi. My fingers trembled as I uploaded the footage and the documents from the notebook to every major news outlet. Tagging Interpol, the CIA, and half a dozen human rights organizations, by the time I stepped back outside, snow had started to fall. The world suddenly felt quiet, too quiet the next day. The story exploded online. International trafficking ring, exposed Swiss officials under investigation. Names, photos, faces, and one familiar name among them: Eli Crane, my ex-wife's husband. The man who'd called me worthless. The man my father once saved from the same system he'd later joined. The fallout was immediate. Crane was arrested. His company assets were frozen. And within a week, Interpol, the real one, this time contacted me. They confirmed the Swiss account had been transferred, legally, to my name. My father's inheritance was finally clean. A month later, I bought a small house in the mountains, not far from where my tent used to stand. When Samantha showed up one morning, tears in her eyes, I didn't gloat. I just handed her an envelope. Inside was a college fund for our son. It's what Dad would have wanted, I said quietly. As she walked away, I looked up at the sky. For the first time in years, I felt peace. My father wasn't a thief. He was a man who risked everything to do what was right. And now, it was my turn to carry his legacy forward.